Effective presentations. This video is brought to you by the School of Computing, Engineering and Built Environment Learning Development Centre. The Learning Development Centre is staffed by a team of experienced academic development tutors, ADTs for short, with particular areas of expertise and skills. We provide students with academic support to help them maximise their potential in areas such as academic writing, English for academic purposes, mathematics, ICT and general study skills. We want to help you to meet your aspirations and to become effective, independent, lifelong learners. And this is the team. We have Melanie and Sally. They specialise in English for academic purposes. And we have Josiane and Ursula, who also provide support for English for academic purposes. And we have Callum and David, who provide support for mathematics. And finally, last but not least I hope, Jim Canning, myself. I specialise in general study skills and ICT skills. This is the link to our website, which will be included in the description below the video, so you'll be able to access it, and there you'll be able to find quite a lot of information on what we supply, workshops we run, a whole range of things. During this session, we're going to cover effective presentations. We'll do a typical presentation task overview, planning and structure, preparation, presenting online, stress management and a conclusion or a summary. So a typical presentation task and overview could be something as simple as a 15-minute group presentation. You'll be given a task from the module leader. You would then cover things like how you addressed the challenge, who did which task in the team, and the problems you faced and how you solved them. Very simple it looks on the surface of it, but to produce a good presentation, there's quite a lot of things you need to look into. So let's cover planning and structure. Simple fact is, failure to plan is the same as planning to fail. Basic details. How long is a presentation? How many people will be presenting? Are there going to be individual time slots? What's the content going to be? You'll be typically do an introduction and an overview, cover some of the key points and expand on the key points, and then there'll be a conclusion or a summary. You also have to decide about questions and answers. When should they be? Should they be during the presentation or at the end, or some variant? What do you want the audience to take away from your presentation? Consider your audience. Familiarity with the topic will determine the level at which you present. If you're presenting to a whole group of students in the same class as you that have been doing the same module, then you'd be expecting them to have the same level of familiarity with the topic as you have, as far as technical understanding. If it was a bunch of school children, and your level is typically much higher technically, then you would have to decide what level to pitch it at. So be aware of your audience, the expected level of their knowledge, and that will determine the level that you'll present to them. Logistics. Where will the presentation take place? Will you use visual aids or any audio or video equipment? When wording your message, less is more. Give your audience headlines. They're not usually expecting to become experts on the subject as a result of hearing your talk. Keep your presentation short and simple. The longer the presentation, the higher the risk of boredom. Fact. How will you remember what you want to say? If you're new to presentations, you may well think the classic cards notes. If you do decide to go down that route, sort them in order and number them just in case. If you're anxious and you drop them and they get out of sequence, you can quickly get things back in order. It's the little things that can make all the difference. Perhaps as you go on and you get more experience at it, you'll be able to use trigger words or phrases to jog your memory. Typically, like myself, I use bullet points in my presentation. I see the bullet point and remind me roughly what I want to say. If I'm doing the same presentation to 3 or 4 different groups at different times, I almost certainly won't be doing exactly the same words all the way through. However, the main content will be covered because I use the bullet points to guide me, and I'll talk about what I remember or want to get across, guided by the bullet points. Another possibility is using the journey method, where you can memorise a sequence of steps and you can use imagination, and you can do something like Imagine walking through each room in your house, and as you open each door in the room, you can then look at that and imagine some visual representation of what you want to talk about, and you know the route you're going to go. So in your mind's eye, you are walking from door to door, room to room. You're seeing the things you want to remember, usually in an exaggerated, active form, something bizarre which really sticks in your memory. So this is a method that has been used since time began. More recently, Dominic O'Brien, who is a world memory champion for several years in a row, he uses the journey method for remembering massive amounts of individual things, and he puts them in routes. So it's something to look into. If you're using slides, try to limit the content of each one to 3 or 4 bullet points, or 1 or 2 longer statements, or a diagram and a short statement. Try not to cram too much into your slides, because if it's too much, the audience won't look at it, or they just won't make sense of it. Choose your backgrounds and text colours and fonts carefully. The audience need to be able to see the content. So example here, I've got a white background. I'm using mostly black text, some darker blue, some reds, and there's a fair bit of contrast. So if you're in the audience, you should be able to make the text out. Now, that peculiar block that was zipping around the screen, there's no doubt in PowerPoint you can do lots of fancy animations. Just don't overdo it. Don't overdo the special effects. They can distract, disorientate, or even irritate the audience. If you're using slides, remember, if you try to squeeze in more text in PowerPoint, the font size reduces and it gets much harder to read. And if it's too hard to read, no one's going to read it. There's an example there. You just open a text box, start typing lots of text in, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, structure. I'm going to run past you the tell them structure. It's a classic salesman type technique. So you're going to tell the audience what you're going to tell them. So in this presentation I will demonstrate. You're going to tell them the key points and then expand and illustrate each point, and then at the end you tell them again what you've told them in summary or in conclusion. So the tell them structure. It's a fairly standard structure. You can put a lot of stuff into it and get across your point in a relatively short space of time. Now, you're going to have an introduction. So you introduce yourself. State the purpose of the presentation. Commence with an outline of the presentation. And during your presentation, you'll present each key point and expand on it. When you're practicing these things, you want to make sure there's a logical sequence to your presentation. Does it flow? Do the slides join together? Do they lead the audience in the direction you want to take them? And you can use evidence and examples to support your main points. When you get to your conclusion, remind the audience of the key points you covered and your conclusions. You could also take the opportunity to address the what now question. So now that we know all of this, what do we do with what we now know? Do you think differently about the topic? Would you take action in some specific areas? Or even if you had to do the task again, what would you do differently next time? Preparation. You should always take time to rehearse the presentation and try doing it standing up. There's more energy when you're standing up, you're breathing better, your voice is going to be stronger. I know myself, if I'm actually recording and I'm sitting down at my desk, my vocal range is restricted and I feel restricted, whereas at this point in time making this video, I've got my microphone on a tripod, I'm standing up and I'm looking at my PC screen, which is a few feet away, and I'm comfortable speaking. My voice is where I want it to be. Rehearse the presentation, standing up if you can, as often as you can before delivering it to a live audience. More rehearsal equals more confident and also more fluent. And it also reduces the tendency to just read from the screen word for word. Another thing you need to consider is where you're going to stand. So do you stand if there's a podium in the room? Do you stand at the podium, particularly in the university? The podiums have the computer built into them with the screen. Or do you feel more comfortable walking about in front of the audience and getting a bit of energy into it? Different things work for different people. Some people like the podium because they're anxious and they almost hide behind the screen. Or they could at least hold the podium if they're feeling a bit shaky, a wee bit nervous. Personally, I must admit, if I'm in the real world, I like walking about just to have that energy, and I find things flow a bit better for me personally. Everyone's different. Another thing you could try doing is video your rehearsal? Nowadays a lot of mobile phones, we've all got video on them, we can record stuff. It could be interesting to present and set up your mobile phone to record you presenting and then watch it back and listen to it. It can be very, very informative. You may well pick up some habits you have that maybe can't be seen. You may well find there's certain things you say frequently. You can either then try to take them out. For example, I've just done an M there. I quite often put in so, and I've just got to the point where I thought, you know what, I'm just leaving it in. It's me, it's the way I am, and it's natural. So, watching yourself in a video can be quite interesting, and even hearing your voice as well. Quite often when you hear yourself getting played back, you may not even recognise your own voice, but that's how you come across to other people. So it can be very informative. Practice your timing. So if it's a team, who's presenting first? How will you know when it's your turn to present? Is it a case of as different titles come up, the folk in the queue basically waiting to go up next know when to step in? Or do you decide when you finish what you're saying and the next slides come up, you then pass it over to the next member in your team? Whatever you agree, make sure you do it consistently to make it look more professional. How will you keep your designated time? Is it a 15-minute presentation? You've got a lot to squeeze in. Is there a clock in the room? Do you wear a watch or do you rely on your mobile phone? Can't really pull out your mobile phone in the middle of a presentation, stand up in front of people. So you need to figure something out that way to help you control the time. Another thing you can do as well is take some time to visualise yourself presenting successfully. So perhaps find somewhere quiet, take a few deep breaths, relax, close your eyes and imagine yourself standing in front of the group, ready to present and then presenting well. It's good practice. More practical stuff. Appearance. How are you going to be dressed? Dressed and groomed appropriately? Is it going to be aligned with the audience expectations? Here's a wee graphic, so one's on the left quite casual, almost scruffy. One's on the right a bit more formal looking. As a general rule of thumb, you probably want to lead to at least smart but casual at the absolute least, so you're presentable, and that then helps the audience expectations they expect of you. Useful if you can, check the venue in advance. Is the projector working? I know in a university it's the amount of times you go into a lecture room and you fire up the computer and you bring up the projector and up pops up the lamp warning saying the lamp needs to be replaced and the class is starting in 5 minutes. Go down, check out your projector. Is the projector working? Is the PC working? Some computers can take quite a long time to start up, and if your audience are sitting there already and you're there waiting for the computer to start up, people get a bit impatient and wonder what's going on. So if you recognise that that kind of thing can happen, you can build in some time, get there earlier, get it all going before the presentation. Are you using your OneDrive? Should you have a backup pen drive in your pocket, just in case? Do you use a remote clicker? I'm using one just now. As I say, I'm several feet away from my computer screen. I've got the wee remote clicker with the USB pop in, and I can change the slides from considerable distance away. It's also a useful thing to have if you do prefer the technique of walking around while presenting. You've got the remote clicker there and it's got the wee laser pointer on it as well, which can come in handy too to highlight something on the slide. Okay, as I already mentioned, how long does a PC take to fire up? You also, if you're using the sound system, is it working? Some systems in the university, they use a battery pack microphone and the batteries aren't always charged. Worth checking ahead of the game if you know that's the way it's going to be. You may well find that your voice is perfectly capable of projecting to the back of the room, but if it's something you've not really tried before, then maybe you want to go try and get someone to come along with you and sit at the back of the classroom and present, and they can tell you if they can hear you clearly or not without a sound system. Lighting, that can be useful too. You may want to set up the blinds to be closed. If it's a sunny day and it's particularly bright, the light coming in can obliterate the screen, the presentation screen. Too much light, too much reflection, so maybe close the blinds ahead of the game before you start. And the seating. How do you want the seating to be arranged? Do you want everyone sitting typical classroom style facing you, or do you want to set up something a bit more cosy with a kind of arc set up? So have a think about these things. You may well be fixed anyway, but if it's something you want to get into a different format, then again you want to get there early and arrange the seats to suit the way you want to present. Our basic personal mobile phone, put it on mute. Nothing worse than being up presenting and a phone goes off and it's yours. That can be quite embarrassing. And last but not least, before you do a presentation, maybe you want to go and take a comfort break. If you're feeling a little bit nervous at all, then needing the toilet at the same time is not useful. So presenting. Voice. So I mentioned earlier on, how well does your voice carry? Do you need a microphone? Also, can you do better than talking in a monotone? So I get back to that text there. How well does your voice carry? Can you do better than monotone? Can you imagine that kind of tone being used all the way through a presentation? Use a variety of tones. Use your natural voice. Use the range of it. Speed and pauses. How quickly do you speak? If you're nervous in a presentation, do you speak too quickly? And perhaps that's where the video I mentioned earlier on might be useful to do, to see how well you speak. Are you nervous? Typically when we're nervous we do speak faster than normal. Now, pauses are effective, can be used to emphasise a point. So for example, pauses are effective. Can be used to emphasise a point. So silence can be a useful thing as well. So that wee pause puts a bit of emphasis on the thing I've just said, allows the audience to recognise that they were supposed to think about that. So again, can be used to emphasise a point. Pauses are effective. Articulation. You need to be careful. Are there any tricky words in your presentation? Have you put in words that you haven't really practised saying out loud? Let's try some for fun. What about that word there? How would you pronounce that? You pronounce it anathema. And the meaning, someone or something that one strongly dislikes or loathes. What about that one? Inchoate. Meaning only partly in existence, partly formed as in an idea. What about this one? Mischievous. Meaning naughtily annoying or troublemaking. What about this one? Quinoa. Meaning a small edible crop seed. So what about this one? How do you pronounce that? Now I actually heard this one pronounced on the Scottish News one time, and I was quite surprised how poorly it was pronounced. You pronounce it hyperbole. The meaning is a way of speaking or writing that makes someone or something sound bigger, better, more, etc. than they are. And the news presenter, instead of saying hyperbole, said hyperbole. So you need to be careful about the words you use. Make sure you know how to pronounce them. Facial expressions. If you're presenting and you're feeling a bit nervous, you can tend to look like a rabbit caught in the headlights. Not a useful look. You want to look confident and relaxed. That's more like it. It's more attractive to the audience. Also, if you're interested in what you're presenting, you look interesting too. So if you're presenting, you look bored with what you're talking about, that tends to transfer to the audience and they won't be interested either. Eye contact. When you're presenting, remember to face the audience and to remember to look up while reading out notes. Make eye contact with the audience. Now if it's a small group you're presenting to, that's quite easy. You basically look at each individual. Now when I say look, I don't mean stare, I mean glance in the direction, make eye contact and then come back, and then the next time you look up, look at a different person and work your way around the small group and keep it going. If it's a bigger room full of people, what you can do is you can quarter the room. Look in the general direction of, say, the back left quarter, and then next time you look up the back right quarter, and then next time the front left quarter, and then the front right quarter, and keep it moving. Keep working your way to make eye contact, to build a relationship with the audience. So they'll quite often feel that even though you maybe not have looked at them directly, they'll feel that you're somehow talking directly to them. So eye contact is a useful one to know. What about your posture? Try and be natural. You can have your feet together or facing slightly away. Stand up straight, don't slump. Again, it goes back to if you don't appear interested, then your audience certainly won't be interested. Hand gestures. Hand gestures are almost like a second language, so be natural, don't have them jammed in your pockets. You can use them to emphasise numbers, so your hand up, 3 points, 4 points, whatever. The audience will see it. If you face an audience and your palms are open towards the audience, that's a lack of threat. Whatever you do, don't point at the audience. That's almost like pointing a gun. It can be quite offensive. And again, I mentioned pauses earlier on. Perhaps in pause, you can allow your hands to fall to your sides. Again, it's a visual break, reset, pause. Now, presenting online, there's some additional things you need to consider. A lot of the things we've talked about so far still count, but there are some additional things. So the first thing would be know the platform. If you're using Teams, Skype, Zoom, Duo, Carbit Ultra, whatever, make sure you know your way around it. Make sure you learn the features. How to put the video and audio on and off. If you're sharing screens, you're sharing files, perhaps you're allowing questions and you keep an eye out for the hands up. Is there a conversation window or a chat window? Participants window? Is live caption involved? So if you have access to these features, then get to know them. So again, presenting online, audio is really important. Are there any issues with background noise? Is there building work going on? Is there traffic issues nearby? If there's something you do about it, is there curtains? Or could you move to another room to do your audio, to do your online presentation? And if not, let your audience know that there may be some noise. And then your video working. If you're using a webcam and you're going to be presenting and people will see you, set your webcam so your eye level is roughly 2/3 of the way up the screen. Also be aware of the lighting. If there's lighting coming towards you, then that, and ideally gently illuminates your face, then that's what you're looking for. You don't necessarily, you absolutely don't want bright sunlight in your face because then you're struggling to see the screen and you'll look really washed out in the image as well. You don't want bright lighting behind you either. That's not good, unless you deliberately want to look like a silhouette. You end up dazzling your audience and you just look like a black shadow. So be aware of lighting. It's the same as photography. Lighting is really important. Have your presentation open and ready to share. Another thing that we're presenting online, are you at the right online place? It's not the first time I've been sent the wrong link and I've been working to do some workshop and you're bringing up the people list and no one's turned up and you found out it was somewhere else who was sent the wrong link. So you can check your participants window to see if people are starting to arrive. What I usually get is you'll maybe get 1 or 2 people who arrive really early and then the rest of the people turn up almost exactly on time or even up to a minute or 2 late, where you end up having to hold back the presentation a little to let enough people turn up so you don't end up repeating yourself, which is a bit of a pain at times. Will there be hearing impaired people in the audience? If so, consider using live caption if that's available. Again, presenting online, what background will you use? Are you going to use a real background, as in what's behind you, the webcam can see, or a virtual one, where you load it onto the computer and your image appears through this virtual background? So if it's a real background you're using, is it tidy and professional looking? If you look at TV interviews these days, and quite a lot of people who have been interviewed will have a bookshelf profile, so they'll have their cameras all set up, and behind them will be a bookshelf with lots of books to make them look very clever. I sometimes wonder how many of these books have ever actually been read. If I actually look at this, so for example, if you were getting an online presentation and the background looked like that, a real background, a real mess, it detracts from what you're trying to do. I would also say, on the other hand, the new ones I brought up there, they're insanely clean, almost look surreal those, but you're looking for something towards the right hand side. Again, it makes you look professional rather than very untidy and disorganised. If you're going to use a virtual background, is it appropriate to the presentation and align with the image you want to project of you? How professional do you want to look? Also, you need to be careful with the virtual backgrounds, the handling of the graphics. If you're wearing a particularly bright coloured shirt or something with a distinct pattern, will that clash with the background? Will the webcam be able to cope with what you're wearing? Also, a bit like I mentioned earlier on about how you present in person, does what you're wearing align with the image you want to project of yourself, how professional you look? So I would certainly err on the side of smart but casual as a minimum. Now, questions, how will you manage them? Online, you can control everything with the audio off. You can suggest to the audience that they can use the hands up function, and you take time out to allow them to put in their point. The audience can direct to use a conversation window to ask questions as well. You can just read them out and give your answers. Or you can actually schedule specific times to pause and offer to answer questions during the presentation. You could offer answering questions at any time. Online in particular, that requires constant vigilance from the presenter. You have to constantly look out for someone asking you a question. Or if you can, you could delegate that to another team member to keep an eye out for that sort of thing. Certainly the offer to allow questions to be asked at any time, whether it's online or face-to-face, you need to be careful, because if the talk is always meant to be a certain point, a certain length of time, allowing people to interrupt and ask questions all the way through can really impact that. You'll end up having to cut out some of your material or run late, which can be reviewed negatively. So if that was the case, you would definitely say, if it's real time managed, a case of you'll go through the presentation and then you can offer to answer questions at the end. Now you would tell the audience at the start that's how you're going to handle the questions, so they will know that they have to wait till the end. Now, presenting well to a computer screen is actually harder than you think, because there's no feedback. There's no physical audience there, there's no instant feedback to what you're saying. There's no audio or video feedback from the audience typically. It can feel, if you're the presenter, you're on stage presenting to an empty hall, and I'm not kidding about that feeling there. The silence is deafening. You feel as though you're talking to yourself. Also, when you're presenting online, it is actually really easy to slip into just reading the content of the PowerPoint and do it in such a way there's no energy and enthusiasm. So you can say, very easy to slip into just reading the content of the PowerPoint slides with no energy or enthusiasm. The way you sit can affect your breathing and can reduce the energy in your voice. If you can, do it standing up, but at least be aware that you can slip into that neutral monotone. So it is very easy to slip into just reading the content of the PowerPoint slides with no energy or enthusiasm. The way you sit can affect your breathing and can reduce the energy in your voice. If you have the luxury of a standing desk, you breathe more easily and your voice sounds more energetic. See what I mean? If you use hand gestures while your live video is streaming to your audience, make sure your hands can be seen on screen. Your webcam may not see your hands, they might just see your shoulders and the head, and you're making all these hand gestures down below and no one can see them. So if you must use them, make sure you get your video set up that you can, or even yourself, raise your hands up higher so they can be seen. Another thing to watch out about PowerPoint is, and you've got two screens, so in my case I have two screens. Make sure you're presenting the correct screen. It can be tricky sometimes. You set up your online and you're presenting using the online software and find out that you're actually presenting the next slide or the kind of standard PowerPoint setup rather than the actual PowerPoint presentation. It's quite easy to do, so you need to be aware of that. Presenting online or in person. Practice, practice and practice some more. Visualise an attentive audience hanging on to your every word. You could also use the built-in PowerPoint presenter coach, how to present better with PowerPoint presentations coach. That link I'll put in the description below. It's quite a useful tool if you've got to practice by yourself. So you've got through the presentation. What happens next? Well, after the presentation, take some time to reflect on your team's performance and your personal performance. Reflect on what went well. What would you do differently next time? Did you get feedback? If not, ask for it. I always ask for feedback at the end of my sessions, because I know I'm not perfect, no one is. So let's move on and talk about stress management. Have you heard of glossophobia? It's the fear of public speaking. Does the thought of standing up to present to a large group of people make you feel a little anxious, a little stressed, or maybe a lot anxious, a lot stressed? Being prepared, rehearsing, being time aware can make serious inroads into anxiety and stress. You're taking the time, you put in the effort, you're not just up there winging it. So you're prepared, you're practiced. That helps to take a lot of the stress away. However, the stress response is a natural protective mechanism that aided survival in our ancestors. It's often referred to the fight or flight response. It prepares the body for immediate action in order to protect itself from harm. There's also the freeze response, which is the equivalent of playing dead, and you may have seen in the past where some folk go up and they just freeze in front of the room. They just can't think what to say, their mind's going a blank. It's a horrible thing. However, stress management, we can help alleviate that. So let me tell you about a thing called the vagus nerve. It's the longest nerve in the body. It starts in the brain, travels down the neck, through the digestive system, the liver, the spleen, the pancreas, heart and lungs. It also connects with other nerves related to social skills, such as eye contact, speech recognising, and processing facial expressions and voices. Now, the tone of the vagus nerve is key to activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Yes, I had to practice saying that a few times, which allows you to relax and recover. Now, research shows that we can improve the vagal tone by breathing in a particular way. And it's a really simple way, but really, really effective. So the technique's called 7-11 breathing, where you breathe in through your nose as you silently count to 7, and then breathe out through your nose as you silently count to 11. And then you repeat that until your stress response is reduced. Now, initially you may all find that tricky. It's not 7 seconds, it's just you counting to 7. If you find it's too much, just try 3-5. The important thing is that you breathe out for longer than you breathe in. And the link there again, we'll show in the description for the video, takes you to a really useful little graphic that takes you through the practicing of 7-11 breathing. It's a really useful little animation. Okay, so in conclusion, we've covered the presentation task and overview, typical group presentation, planning and structure, content, timing, the telling them structure, conclusion and Q&As. We've covered preparation, rehearse, visualise, appearance, venue, equipment, presenting, voice, eye contact, posture, feedback and reflection, presenting online. We've covered platforms, setup checks, background, questions and practice. And we've also touched on stress management, told you about the vagus nerve and 7-11 breathing. I hope you found this presentation useful, and remember, any of the links that we're showing in the video will be in the description area in the YouTube. So finally, if you do have any questions about this particular session, feel free to email askldc@gcu.ac.uk and I'll get back to you. Thank you for listening and watching.